All right, so in this lesson, we're going to talk a little bit more about HTML. Not so much about coding, but best practices when we are coding with HTML, because we do have some mistakes in our code. It's not necessarily a mistake because our code is being displayed in our browser based on the tags, attributes, and elements that we're using, but it's very disorganized and it's hard to read. And we're going to go ahead and clean up our HTML file, make it much easier to read and organize it a little bit. And then we'll apply some of those ideas to our CSS file as well. So in my HTML file, I have a lot of empty spaces in between my tags. So this adds to the size of your file. It may not seem like a lot with just 98 lines of code, but when you have thousands and thousands of lines of code, it adds up, and it just means that that particular page is going to take longer to load in the browser the larger the file size. So we want to make sure that the file size is as small as possible based on the code that we're using. So we want to eliminate all these extra lines in between. We can even go so far as create no lines in between, but I do like to have a little bit of space in between my elements. Not so much my content and my tags, like our paragraph tag right here. And then the other thing is the indentation of my tags is incorrect. We want to set up our structure and the order of our tags in a way that it's easy to recognize and see different parts of the code so we can access that particular part of the code faster if we need to go back to it later on to make some changes or to update it as needed. So right here, I have 3 lines of code for this particular tag. Instead, it should all be on the same line. We shouldn't have each one of those elements on a separate line. So that's the first thing that we need to do. Same thing with our A tag. I would rather have the A tag up here like this. There's no hard set rule that says that this is incorrect. It just makes it cleaner and easier to recognize. We also have some indentation that is off. So we have our A tags up here and our closing tag down here that's indented more than our image. So to fix that, we're just going to select all this content here and then hit our tab key to line it up. The other problem we have though is we have our HTML tag, then we have our head tag indented, which is fine. And then we have our title tag, which is indented again. So in a sense, this is row 1, row 2, row 3. Then we come down here, body is aligned with the head tag, which is fine. And then this content is aligned with this. But this title is not aligned with this. So we have to select it all and click tab to line everything up. And you can already see it's starting to look a lot cleaner than it did before. Okay, so if you're coding and you don't get into the habit of doing this and your entire HTML file is messed up and you have all these extra lines and you don't want to sit there and do this manually for each line individually, I have some good news for you because we can select all this content with Command or Control and A and then copy Command or Control and C, or just come up here to your menu options here and select all and copy from up here. Okay, now that we have that information copied to our clipboard, there's a website we can go to that will automatically clean up our HTML for us. So here's the web address here. It's 10bestdesign.com/dirty markup. Now just go in and paste all that information, and all our HTML code is in here. We need to select the type of code, which is HTML. And then you have some options here for organizing the content or the elements based on your own personal preference. So we have indent with tabs, the number of spaces, the indent type, auto, block level, none. Let's set it to block level. And then the full page or code fragment. I'm going to leave it at full page, Preferred line length, I'm going to select none, and then we're just going to click clean. And now it removes all those individual lines that we had before and adds tabs correctly in the proper place. So I can go ahead and select all and copy it again and then paste it into brackets. And now we can see we have some nice clean code with proper indentation for each of the different tags. The only thing I don't like is this right here, the title. Again, I would rather have that on one line. So let's see if we can fix that with our options. So if we come down here to indent, we can change this back to auto, click clean, and then it puts everything on one line. We also have none, which doesn't indent anything. I would prefer to have auto, but the only problem is we now have no spaces in between our tags, and our indentation for the other tags have been reset to the left. So in this case, I would just select everything in the body, click my tab key, that will move everything over. I'm going to add a space in between my image and the first headline and the paragraph. And then I'm going to do the same for the other parts of the body, which is the tree headline and our sidebar headline as well. And then another space below that to separate it from the body tag. So now everything is set up and nice and clean. The only other thing I don't like is the BR on its own separate line. I would rather have it right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and add those back and delete the extra ones in between. Now there's one other thing that I don't like about the current indentation. My paragraph is in the same indent line of my headline. I would rather have my paragraphs indented past my headline. Again, it just makes it cleaner and more organized and easier to read this way versus having everything aligned to the left. So this is a real pain to do after the fact, after we've gone through and we've done all our coding. And could you imagine trying to fix and clean this up with thousands of lines of code? It would just take forever. So that's why we need to get into the habit of using best practices as we code and indent our elements as we are coding the page. Now there's one last thing that we can do to help organize everything so it makes it easier to locate what we need, and that's by using what is known as comments. So I'm going to place my first comment above my image right here. I'm going to go ahead and click a couple times, and then I'm going to add a piece of code to let me know that this particular section below my comment is an image. So we're going to start with an angled bracket, an exclamation point, 2 dashes, and then I'm going to describe what is inside or below this particular comment. In this case, it's an image. Then we're going to close out that comment with 2 more dashes and another angled bracket. And you may have noticed that all the text below it turns to a light gray. And that means that the comment that I'm creating is not done yet, or it's not completed until I finish the code and add that final bracket. So this particular piece of code is not visible in our web browser, even though it's inside of the body. This is just for our information. The web browser is not going to read this information and try to interpret it because it knows this particular information has nothing to do with the actual web page design or layout or content itself. It's strictly for our own use as web developers to help organize all our code. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this information and create another comment below the image because I have another set of content that I want to comment on. to let me know that everything below this is the photo section, but we do have another section here, which is the main content. And then we also have our sidebar. So let's add another comment here. And that's it. We can definitely see the different sections that make up our web page thanks to adding our comments. So I recommend getting into the habit of using comments to separate out different parts of your HTML and to properly indent as needed. There's no set of rules on what you should use. You don't necessarily have to have the paragraph indented to the right of your headline. That's just my personal preference. But you have to remember, if you're going to have a team of web developers working on this project, you want to be consistent in how you indent and comment. So you want to make sure your comments describe exactly what's going on below it so that the other people on your team know exactly what this code is for. All right, so that's it for HTML. We've typed out all the code for the web page, we've cleaned it up, and we've added comments. Now we need to make this particular web page nice and pretty. So if you're ready to do that, we're going to go ahead and code with some CSS to make it look just like our Photoshop web design.